Hello, this is lecture 3 of the new series of video lectures that have resulted from the transition from face-to-face classes to inline or online classes. This class, if we were meeting, would be the March 26th class, the third in this new series of lectures. All right, we are in the Bill of Rights. We've talked about how the Bill of Rights came to be, the debate that centered around the original Constitution's lack of a Bill of Rights, the debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and we have talked about Amendments 1, 2, and 3 so far. All right, so today let's begin with a discussion of the Fourth Amendment. Much of the Bill of Rights concerns itself with the rights of the accused. It's not politically incorrect to say this, but you know by now that I'm not too politically correct. And so really what we're talking about is the rights of the bad boys, right? In America, let me do this the other way. Once again, the Fourth Amendment is the result of something bad that was happening in England at this time. And in America, we did not want for any of that stuff to ever occur here. And so, into especially the Fourth Amendment, the rights of the accused are written here. In America, in many parts of the world, you are considered to be guilty, and you've got to prove that you were innocent. Well, that sucks. I much prefer the way it is here. You are considered to be innocent until you're proven guilty. Boy, that's a 180-degree difference, isn't it? The Fourth Amendment says, and I'm going to read the whole thing, and then we'll come back and break it up. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, first of all, let's talk about something that's not in the Constitution. At least it's not here by name. Nowhere in the Constitution does the word privacy appear. Right? Just not there. But the concept of privacy is strong in the Constitution. So just because you don't call it something doesn't mean that it's not there. The original Constitution didn't use the word slave, did it? Was slavery there? Sure it was. The Fourth Amendment tries to fix the problems that were happening in England at this time with regard to accusing people of doing stuff. All right, here we go. Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Now, the Constitution doesn't define what unreasonable means, does it? And as a result, quite often, the meaning of unreasonable is left up to the judge, right? One judge might think something is unreasonable, another might say, oh, that's perfectly rational. That makes sense. But generally, we have a pretty good idea of what's unreasonable. If we're sitting around at night watching television and all of a sudden somebody kicks our door in and at gunpoint begins to search through our house for something that's unspecified, I think we would all agree that that's probably unreasonable. And there's a list of things here that an unreasonable search is considered to be unreasonable. Our persons, our bodies, right? Our houses, our papers, our belongings. Those are all protected, even though the word privacy is not used. Those are private areas, and those are protected against unreasonable search and seizure. But hopefully, at this point, you're sitting there saying, well, wait a minute now. I don't want anybody to bust in, but aren't there circumstances under which law enforcement needs to check my house and check my papers and check my belongings if they think that I've done something, if I've broken the law? And the answer is yes, but there is a process that must be followed. And as a matter of fact, the process is called due process, D-U-E. There is a really strict protocol. There is a strict procedure that must be followed in order. You can't skip a step. You can't jump from step 1 to step 4. You can't go from step 5 back to step 2. You've got to do it in order. And if you skip a step, there's a real good chance that your case eventually is going to be thrown out because you didn't follow the protocol. You didn't follow due process. So, what is the first step? Constitutionally, what is the first step in due process? Well, it's a warrant. Let's assume that there's an old rundown house in my neighborhood, right? Nobody lives there. It's abandoned, but people are coming in and out of it day and night, especially night. And the people who are coming in range from people who are obviously very poor to people who are obviously very wealthy, Some of them are riding bicycles and some of them are driving Mercedes Benzes. Some of them are dressed in Gucci and some of them are dressed in rags. But the thing that they have in common is that they're coming into that abandoned house. And I own a home a couple of doors away, and I've got children, and I'm really concerned for the safety of myself and my family, especially my babies. And so I complained to the police. Now, can the police go down to that abandoned house and arrest everybody who's in it? Eventually, maybe, but not yet. Certain things, remember we said that certain steps have to be satisfied. The first step that has to be satisfied is something called probable cause. And just as the phrase implies, there's got to be a reasonable expectation that something bad is going on, right? Well, the fact that there's this high traffic level through that abandoned, vacant house probably is probable cause to look further. Now, you can't arrest anybody yet, but that's the first step. You have satisfied probable cause. There is probably a cause for all that foot traffic that's going in and out of that house. Now, what's the assumption here? Drugs, right? But we don't know that yet. And so establishing probable cause is the first step in obtaining a warrant that will let you in there legally. Okay, now what's the next step? The police are going to go down there to that house, and they are going to stake it out or whatever they do. They're probably going to take video, audio, right? And they're going to write up a report, and they are going to talk about all the things that they saw happening, and they are going to sign it, and by signing it, they swear that the content of the report is accurate. In other words, they take an oath that everything is fine, that everything is accurate. Now, what else does that report need? It requires the story of what they saw, but it also, according to the Constitution, specifically gives the location of that house, the address, probably a description of it. You know, it's painted gray and it has a black roof. You know, and it has 2 oak trees in the front yard. Okay, something that you can zero in on the location. It is at 406 South Oak Street, Hammond, Louisiana. Something specific that law enforcement and the judge can hang his hat on. And also in the report, the report should contain a list of the people that you want to question and the things that you want to look for if you ever gain entrance into that house. The Constitution calls it the persons or the things to be seized. Now, armed with that document, you take it to the judge. And the judge now reads it, and he will make a determination about whether this investigation should continue or not. Now, he might say, look, you did a good job, you put a lot of hours into this, but I'm still really not convinced that this is a crack house or a drug house or a whatever. You need more evidence. I need more information. In which case, you'd go back and you'd accumulate more information. But if he's satisfied that what you've got there is what he needs to issue the warrant, he will issue the warrant. And what will be on the warrant? Specifics. Once again, the address, the people that they're looking for, the things that they're looking for, all that stuff will be on that warrant. Now, the judge has issued the warrant. Now law enforcement has the power to go into that house. Now, whether they knock the door down or not, I suppose it will be determined by the circumstances. But nevertheless, they're in the house now. They're in the house at that address. They're in a house that meets that description, that satisfies that description. They're looking for specific people who were named on the warrant, and they're looking for stuff that's itemized on the warrant. You know, I'm looking for marijuana, I'm looking for coke, I'm looking for whatever. And by observing due process, in other words, that series of steps in a specific order, not leaving out a step, covering all your bases, dotting all your I's and crossing all of your T's, makes the warrant a legitimate warrant. And what that means is the people and the things that are found in that house now can be used in a court of law. Now, what happens if you have a warrant that says you're looking for cocaine, right? And you find cocaine, but you also find an illegal weapon. Can you confiscate the weapon? Well, yes, you can, because it's illegal. But can you prosecute the person? I almost said persecute. Can you prosecute the person for an illegal weapon? Well, that is something that the courts still argue over, but generally, no. You lose the weapon, but you're probably not going to be prosecuted for the possession of the weapon. You will be prosecuted for the possession of the drugs that was named on the warrant, however. And things that are not on the warrant that law enforcement takes possession of very well might not be considered to be valid evidence at the trial. So you got to be very careful, don't you? All right. The Fifth Amendment. Now, many people think that they know all about the Fifth Amendment, and some of you might, but I dare say that most of you don't know all there is to know about the Fifth Amendment. Generally, when we think of the Fifth Amendment, we're thinking about you can't be forced to incriminate yourself, right? Well, that is a part of the Fifth Amendment, but that's only a small part of the Fifth Amendment. So let's talk about the whole thing. Now, remember, we are still talking about the rights of the accused. The rights of the accused. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime. What's a capital crime? Fundamentally, a capital crime is a crime that for which, if you're found guilty, you can be executed. That's what a capital crime is. No person shall be held, and that's the bad stuff, right? Murder, rape, kidnapping, armed robbery. Those are all capital crimes. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime. So, not just capital crimes, but crimes can be really bad and not be capital, right? Sure. Unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. All right, let's stop right there. We have talked about the job of a grand jury in this class before when we were talking about impeachment. What we have said is that in a civilian court, if enough evidence exists to send the case to trial, the term that is used is indictment. You have been indicted. Same thing with regard to a government employee. If enough evidence exists to send your case to trial, we use the word impeached, right? Same thing. So, what the Fifth Amendment says that you cannot be tried for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless you're indicted. So, we talked about due process earlier. Here's the next step in due process. Somebody thinks that you have committed a crime, they arrest you, they put you in jail. Now remember, what does habeas corpus say? That's due process. It's all a part of it. Habeas corpus says that you cannot be held indefinitely unless you're charged with a crime. So that's part of the due process. But let's assume that you are charged with a crime, right? Everything's legal so far. What's the next step? Your case is going to go before a grand jury. Now, a grand jury, let's be careful now. The grand jury is the only job of the grand jury is to determine if enough evidence exists to send your case to the regular trial jury. Right? They're going to call in witnesses. Did you actually see this man commit that crime? Oh, yeah, I did. Or how about this one? You're accused of holding up a liquor store, right? And you're not only accused of holding up a liquor store, but you're accused of killing the clerk. The clerk, was the only one in there at the time that you came in, and you've killed him. So there are no witnesses, right? But there is closed circuit TV camera, right? So the grand jury, even though there's no witness to the murder, there is a video account of the murder, and that will be used to determine whether or not enough evidence exists to send your case to trial. Sure. Let's assume that you don't kill anybody, but you still rob the place. But you put your hands on the counter. What do you leave behind? Fingerprints. All of that stuff, right, can be used to develop a case against you to determine if enough evidence exists to send your case to trial. Okay, that's all a part of the due process, and all of that must be done. You cannot try a person without an indictment by the grand jury. Now, what would happen if the grand jury decides there's not enough evidence? They'll turn you loose. They'll turn you loose. Once again, the Fifth Amendment is a response to unfair practices in England with regard to people who were accused of crimes. Now, that part of the Fifth Amendment continues by saying, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Now, most of you have never been in the military, and so you probably don't have a lot of familiarity with how the military works. Let me tell you that the military justice system is different from the civilian justice system. In some ways they're similar, and in some ways it's way apart, and you've got to know the rules in order to navigate. And that is why it says except, right? What it says is you can't be tried unless you're indicted. Well, the military quite often doesn't indict. They just arrest you and they gather the evidence, but there's no real grand jury. They just send the case to trial. And that's perfectly okay, because the Constitution draws the distinction between a civilian court and a military court, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Now, the Fifth Amendment continues by saying, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. And this is called the double jeopardy rule. And once again, this is a reaction to unfair legal practices in England. In England, back in that time, you could be accused of a crime and the jury find you innocent. What might the government do? They'd just try you all over again, right? And the jury would find you innocent. And what would the government do? They'd try you. They would keep trying you until the jury found you guilty. We decided that never was going to happen here in the United States. That once you are found innocent in a trial, that you cannot be tried for that crime again. Now, of course, that presents all kinds of problems, potential problems, but that's the way our system works. You cannot be tried twice for the same crime. Now, let's stop right here. And let's recall that we are in the year 2020, and this document is written in 1788. Lots changed since then. One thing that we have now that didn't exist, that no one could have dreamt of back then, was DNA evidence. Excuse me. DNA evidence. All right, let me use this scenario. You are accused of raping a woman. and you're found not guilty. But the investigator really thinks that you're guilty. He just can't prove it, right? So what does he do? What might he do? He might save all the evidence and put it in an evidence locker where it's kept pure and untouched, uncontaminated, and it sits there for 20 years. And then DNA testing is perfected. So what does he do? He takes, for example, the underwear of the lady who was raped, and they send it to a DNA testing lab. And guess what they find? They find that the stains on her underwear belongs to you. Now, why would any evidence from you be found on her underwear unless you had done the crime, right? Now, at this point, can you be retried for that crime? And the answer is yes, because new evidence has been discovered, and new evidence makes it a new trial. But generally, you cannot be tried twice for the same offense. By the way, what is it? We need to read this a little bit more carefully too, because there's something here that we tend to sort of gloss over. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life and limb. Here's my question. What does the Constitution say about the death penalty? I'm not asking you what you think about the death penalty. I'm asking you what the Constitution says about the death penalty. It seems that the Constitution favors the death penalty because it says that you can't lose your life or limb after you're tried over and over and over again and they finally reach a guilty verdict. Just file that away, okay? Fifth Amendment continues by saying, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. You cannot be forced to be a witness against yourself. Can't do it. Now, what do we normally think? Okay, there's a trial and somebody is accused of this terrible crime, and since you can't be forced to witness against yourself, the prosecutor is going to say, Mr. Smith, where were you on the night of the 4th, right? And you say, I respectfully decline to answer that because the answer might incriminate me. And that's a perfectly constitutional response. It is. You have no obligation to incriminate yourself. However, what is the first thing that goes through the minds of all the people who are listening to this? He's guilty. He's guilty as sin. And he knows he's guilty, and he knows that if he speaks and tells the truth, that he is going to go to jail. Right? You cannot be compelled to testify against yourself. Now, can you confess? Yes. Now, can you be forced to confess? No. How about this one? In certain legal situations, husbands and wives are considered to be one person. So if you can't be compelled to testify against yourself, your spouse cannot be compelled to testify against you either. Operating under the same rule here. Now, I tell my male students, someday you're going to get married, probably, right? And you better treat that woman right. Because if you abuse her, you mistreat her, you do something to her, and if someday in the future you are accused of a crime that could send your sorry butt to jail, she can't be forced to testify against you, but she can volunteer. And what if she knows that you actually did the crime? And she's tired of you using her as a punching bag. What's the easy way to get rid of you, dude? She'll tell the truth. She doesn't have to lie. Just tell the truth, and that'll send you to Angola, right? So, there's one more reason why you should treat your wife with love and compassion. The Fifth Amendment continues. I told you that there are parts of this that you were aware of, but there are parts that you were not aware of either. The Fifth Amendment continues by saying, "Nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." Okay, it's wrapping up, isn't it? We've already talked about due process. That phrase is used here as well. Here is I asked you a few moments ago, what does the Constitution say about the death penalty? Well, here we are in the Fifth Amendment again. What are some of the punishments that you can receive for a crime? It lists them. You can be deprived of life, huh? Liberty. You can be deprived of your life. You can be executed if it's a proper crime. You can, even if you're not executed, you can lose your liberty. You can be put in the penitentiary, or you can lose property. In other words, you can get a fine. Sometimes you can be put in jail and fined at the same time for the same crime. You got to pay a $50,000 fine and you go to jail for 10 years. Nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, let's be very careful here. The answer to the question, can you be deprived of life, liberty, or property, is no, unless it's due process. And if there is due process, then, oh yes, you can be deprived of life, liberty, and or property, most certainly. The Fifth Amendment ends by saying, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." This whole idea of taking private property for a public use, the fancy term is eminent domain. EMINENT. Eminent domain. For Americans, the ownership of private property, is one of the most precious rights that we have. Can the government take your private property away from you? Yes, but only under certain circumstances. And actually, there's only one circumstance. If it's going to be used to benefit the public. For example, let's assume that you live in a neighborhood. It's an old neighborhood. They don't have any sidewalks. No sidewalks in that neighborhood at all. But there are a bunch of school children, and they've got to walk down to the end of the block to catch the school bus, right? And with no sidewalks, what that really means is they've got to walk on the shoulder of the road, and that's dangerous. There's always the chance that they might be hit by a car. And so the city where you live decides to install sidewalks. But in order to install that sidewalk, they've got to take some of your property, right? Yeah, they're going to cover some of your property with concrete. Can they do it? Yes. Under what circumstances? If you are justly compensated, if they pay you a fair price for that property, and if it's for a public use. And a sidewalk that saves the lives of children obviously is a public use, isn't it? How about this one? The city of Hammond wants to build a new library, and they want to put it on some of your property. Can they take your property to build that library? Yes, because it's for a public use. Can they take your property to build a hospital? Sure, it's a public use. Can they take your property to widen the road? Yep, because it's a public use. Now, can Holiday Inn come in and take your property and build a Holiday Inn on your property? No. Even though the public is going to be using the Holiday Inn, it's not a public use. It is rare for a person from whom property is taken for a public use to be satisfied with the compensation they receive. They always think they've been cheated. But I got to take up for the government. They do try to do their homework, and they do try to give you a fair price for your property. The Sixth Amendment. Once again, we're dealing with, now, by the way, why eminent domain is in the Fifth Amendment, I don't have a clue, because it has nothing to do with the rights of the accused, but it's just there, all right? Don't ask me. I can't answer the question. The Sixth Amendment gets back to the rights of the accused, though. In all, not some, not most, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. Now, if you're accused of a crime and due process has been observed faithfully, and your case has gone to the grand jury, and the grand jury decides that there's enough evidence, right? And they indict you. Okay, now you're going to trial. That's where we are, right here. You're getting ready to be tried for the crime. The Constitution says that you have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. Now, it's really rare these days to have a speedy trial, to be quite honest with you. Because one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons is these minor drug cases. Look, I don't do drugs. I've never done drugs. I don't even like to take legal prescription medication for the right reason. I just don't like it. But I know there are a lot of you who do. And let me just hope that you stop. But that's neither here nor there. Our judicial system quite often is just clogged up, backed up by these minor pot charges and things like that. Because you have the right as an American citizen to demand a trial. But because of these minor drug offenses, our legal system tends to back up, and it becomes almost impossible for you to receive a speedy trial. Now, it's going to be a public trial, sure, yeah, but not necessarily a speedy trial. By an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. Ooh, that's hard. You should be tried in the place where you are accused of doing the crime, right? At one time, it was not really difficult to find an impartial jury to try your case. Because back in the day, those were the days before instant news, before 24-hour news, Fox and CNN and all that stuff. Before TV, before radio. If you didn't subscribe to a newspaper, you were pretty much in the dark about what was going on around you, including who's been arrested for what and when is their trial going to take place. And so it was rather easy to find an impartial jury of 12 good men. Not so much anymore. Look, I can pick up my phone today and I can find out what's happening all over the world and the nation and the state and Tangipahoa Parish. If I'm interested in things like that, and I am. Now, some of you don't care. All you care about is who won on American Idol last week. That's all you care about. But some of us do care about more than that, and so we're sort of plugged in. And we all human beings have opinions. Some of us have really strong opinions. So, how difficult in this day and age of instant and total information, how difficult is it to find an impartial jury? It might be very difficult. But ideally, you get a speedy trial, you get a public trial. Let's go back and talk about that a little bit more. I'm sorry. Speedy trial. Even though speedy trials might not be possible anymore because of the backlog, the judicial system still tries to push your case through as quickly as possible. All right. Will it be speedy? Is it going to be in just a week or 2 weeks? Probably not. Might be a month or two, but they'll assign you a place in line and you will eventually have your trial. So it won't be speedy, but it will be regular. Now, how about this idea of a public trial? This, once again, is something that was happening in England. You might be arrested for a crime in England, and you would be tried. Yeah, there'd be a judge and there'd be a jury. It looks fine, right? But it's not a public trial. In other words, nobody knows what's going on. It's a secret trial. The Sixth Amendment to the Constitution bans secret trials. They have all got to be public. And it doesn't matter please don't try me in public because what you're accusing me of is so embarrassing. The people at my church are going to know that I'm a jerk. The people at my office are going to know that I'm a criminal. Can we just keep this between ourselves? I'll go to jail. Just keep it secret. No. No secret trials. It's got to be speedy. It's got to be public. You're going to air your dirty laundry in front of God and everybody, whether you like it or not. It will be before an impartial jury, or as impartial as we can make it today. We just do the best we can. I remember years and years and years ago, I was called for jury duty here in Tangipahoa Parish. I went to a meet on the day that the jurors were going to be selected. And they did it alphabetically. There I was sitting with a name that started with T. So you can imagine I was there all day long. I've already forgotten what the guy was accused of. But I remember that as they were examining the potential jury members, the district attorney asked one of the potential jury members, he said, "Do you know the defendant?" And he said, he was an old man, right? He said, "No, sir, I don't know him, but I know his daddy." The DA said, "Oh, you know his daddy? How do you know his daddy?" He thought he was going to say, "Well, I go to church with him," or "How do you know your daddy?" "Well, he came by my house the other day and he had a list of all the people who were going to be considered for the jury. And he said, if you're on the jury, will you vote to free my son?" Ooh, the DA said, called the sheriff over and said, "Arrest the defendant's daddy and put him in jail in a cell right next to his no good outlaw son," right? So, an impartial jury sometimes can be difficult to find, and sometimes it might produce funny stories too. Now, what it says is that the impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, and it says that district should have been already decided. In other words, Louisiana, for example, is divided into judicial districts. Tangipahoa Parish is divided into parish judicial districts. So, whatever district you're accused of committing the crime in, that is where you should be tried. The Sixth Amendment continues by saying the accused shall enjoy the right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. We know all about this. That's habeas corpus, isn't it? You cannot be held indefinitely unless you are told what your crime is. You got to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. And if they don't uh, accuse you of something, eventually they are going to have to let you go. Now, the Sixth Amendment continues by saying, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor. Ah. Can you be forced to testify in a case against somebody who's not your spouse? Now, remember, if you're the spouse, you cannot be forced to. But if you're not a spouse, even if you're a relative, can you be forced to testify against your brother? For that matter, can you be forced to testify for your brother? And the answer to both questions is yes. And it has nothing to do with whether you want to testify or not. Oh, you know that your brother robbed that bank. He told you so, right? He told you. You know he's guilty, but he's your brother and you love your brother. You don't want to see your brother go to Angola. And you certainly don't want to testify against him. It doesn't matter what you want. You can be forced to testify against your brother or anybody. I'm just using brother as an example. Now, the other side of the coin is also true. Can you be forced to testify if it'll help your brother? Right? You know who robbed that bank, and you know it was not your brother. But you and your brother have been fighting with each other ever since you were kids. And you really would love to see your brother go to jail. But you don't want to testify for him because you know he didn't do the crime. Because if you testified, he'd be turned loose, right? Can you be forced to testify in favor of your brother? Yes. Sixth Amendment continues. The accused shall have assistance of counsel for his defense. We all know the Miranda things. We watch Law and Order. We know how, you have the right to remain silent, blah, blah, blah. You have the right to counsel, and if you can't afford it, one will be provided for you. We all know that stuff. That's what this is talking about. You have the right to an attorney, and you have the right to have one even if you can't afford one. One will be provided for you for free. There's a term for this called the public defender. Right? That's the public defender. The lawyer that you get free when you can't afford to hire the lawyer. Now, you don't have to have a lawyer. You can act as your own attorney. But what's the old saying? A man who has himself as an attorney has a fool for a client, right? I mean, lawyers, they know this stuff. And you don't. You think you do. You think you know it all. I mean, I know a lot of history, but I don't know it all. I don't even come close. My son is a hotshot attorney in Washington, D.C. He works for a big firm. And it is the policy of the firm that my son dedicate a percentage of his time, I think it's 15%, to what's called pro bono work. Pro bono is Latin for free, right? He is not a member of the public defender's office. He's a member of a private firm, but his firm's policy is to help those who can't afford a lawyer. Now, some of these free lawyers, that's how a lot of brand new lawyers, fresh out of law school, that's how they get a start. They go down to the public defender's office and they put their name on the list and they volunteer and they get experience in trial, right? Well, maybe they're good lawyers and maybe they're not so good lawyers, and it's sort of like a crapshoot. When you get one of these brand new lawyers, it's really undetermined about whether you're going to get a good one or a bad one. Of course, if you get my son for an attorney, you got a good one. But in any case, whether you hire a hotshot, if you have the money, you can hire a hotshot attorney. That's great. Or whether you got to depend on the public defender's office or on the policy of a firm to provide free law, will determine what kind of how good your representation is. I still believe this very firmly, that this is one of the areas in America where we still need improvement. Can you buy justice? And the easy answer is no, because we all operate under the same laws, and right. But think about this for just a moment. Can you buy justice? Well, okay, here I am. I'm a college professor. I don't have a lot of money, but I probably have more money than you. Now, someday, hopefully, you'll have a lot more than me, right? That's why you're here. But for right now, let's say that I'm accused of something and I've got some stock that I could cash in. I could afford an attorney. And you are a young man or a young woman. You don't have hardly anything. You don't know where your next meal is coming from. You certainly can't hire an attorney. So you have to depend on the attorney that's supplied by the public defender's office, and the one that they give you just graduated from law school. The ink on his diploma is still wet. And you and I are both accused of the same crime. Which of us has a better chance of getting off? I say it's me, because my attorney is more experienced. So it's not that you paid anybody to throw your case. That's not what I mean when I say justice is for sale. But what I am saying is that the quality of your defense quite often is determined by how much money you've got and how well you can afford a real hotshot attorney. Okay. That is a good place to stop, folks. Okay, that, if you're keeping up, that was lecture 3. And we will continue. Let me see. Let me look. Even I have to look at the syllabus these days. Okay. The next lecture, the next video lecture will be number 4. And we will pick up where we left. We will start with the 7th Amendment, and then we will continue. All right? Until then, I'll see you, and I'll see you soon.